speak, so if I suddenly screw out the door, it's for good cause. And Councilor Virgo is standing by to grab the gavel and run a better meeting than I would, and Councilor Shalino is standing by to jump in as the alternate if must needs be. I'm Councilor Bruce Toby, I chair the committee, the vice chair is Greg Berger, and Council Hall. The first order of business this evening is a procedural discussion only on the manner whereby the committee chooses to review special council permit application 22aug12 under the hotel overlay district provisions of the zoning ordinance as it relates to, and other provisions, as it relates to property of 47 to 61 Commercial Street. I believe all the members have had a chance to go through the voluminous application, and I've been having conversations as chair with the Community Development Director, Mr. Cavatori, with the Administrative Assistant to the Mayor, Mr. Duggan, and with the City Clerk, who's been... Fire back. Shit, this will be a long night.
Yes.
You will purge the word shit from the table.
Gotcha.
And that was my son-in-law's fault. And the city clerk is here this evening to sort of summarize for us where we stand vis-a-vis the Conservation Commission in its role and the Planning Board in its role, so that we can do a process that is coordinated to the greatest extent possible, non-duplicative, so that it is efficient for applicant and concerned citizens alike, say nothing of the council and the other boards, frankly. And to that end, I'd recognize the city clerk, Linda Lowe, to summarize where we think we are at this point in terms of process and dates and when the committee might be able to substantively sink its teeth in this.
Well, this committee represents the city council, obviously, and has the city council's first look at things, but they also have to coordinate with all the other processes that are going on right now. So they will be doing their separate reviews of the application for both the hotel major project and the lowlands permit, but they have to do it in conjunction with all the others, or otherwise what they do would be premature and wouldn't be completely based on all of the other facts that they need to know. So right now what you have already going on, and John Cunningham can correct me if I leave something out or misstate it, but the project is at the Conservation Commission for the preliminary review, where they do what they call, I think it's a delineation of the project, and that'll be going, I think they're going to be having meetings on that into mid-September for the town hall. And then when the project came into the city council, the zoning law requires that it gets separately sent out at that time to the planning board, so it has now gone to the planning board for their separate review, where, as you probably know from other projects, they review it and come back with a recommendation. They don't vote to approve or not approve. They make a recommendation which comes back to this committee where they make their final recommendation. Right now, this committee and that board are trying to coordinate what they do and not have too many duplicate hearings, because it obviously people are interested in going to hear both groups, and you can't be in two places at the same time. So probably Greg Cavatori said that his board would be meeting on September 20th, and it looks like Councilor Toby's committee might meet at the same time in a joint meeting on that for their first substantive meeting, similar to the other joint meetings that you've seen before on projects. And then they would still separately come back and meet as the three-person group that they are, and they would also be waiting to then receive the planning board's report, and they would be waiting and looking to see if any decisions have been made by the Conservation Commission yet. And then this project is also different than some that people might be familiar with, because it's what is called a major project. So in the course of this committee's review, my office has already sent out a request, as is required by section 5.7 of the zoning ordinance, to several different departments requiring that they make a report to this committee on their view, their specialized view of the project. For example, the Board of Health, if they had issues about, usually it's on sewered areas, but there might be other issues that the Board of Health would be interested in this particular site. It goes to the DPW and the city engineer and the fire chief and the building inspector, and they all separately report back to this committee on their review. And then on another track, going on at the same time, is what's called site plan review, which is not done by the city council. It's in the zoning ordinance, but it is done exclusively by the planning board. And that's sort of like an overview that, of course, the city council would want to know the outcome of, but as I said, it's not performed by the city council. And Greg Cavatori has assured the city council that that'll be pretty much like a separate track that the board will be doing, his board will be doing both of those reviews at the same time with slightly different focus. And then the Concom, at some point when they finish their preliminary review, will start their more formal final review for what's called order of conditions for the project, for whatever it happens to need. And that'll also be going on at the same time as these reviews. So it obviously will take a great deal of coordination. And there's nothing in the zoning ordinance that requires that the council has 100% of all those reviews in their hands, except for the ones that are referred to, like the departmental reviews and the planning board recommendation. So all they can do is the best that they can do to collect as much information as possible, because Concom, for example, is completely separate from the city council, and this city council can say, and if they give an approval to a project, say, dependent upon the applicant having received whatever approvals they need from that other completely separate board, that could be a possibility. And then in the ordinance itself, it talks about the process holding a hearing within 65 days, but obviously with all of what I just listed having to happen, it's highly unlikely that that could be done properly within 65 days, and that part of that time has already started to run. So what usually happens even in smaller projects is the council works with the applicant and asks for an extension of that 65-day period, and it can get moved out as long as the applicant is agreeable. And then, depending on what that date is finally determined to be, and when those other reviews are done, the public hearing would be held by the city council.
So the immediate takeaway I would posit for the committee's consideration is that the first and next meeting, when we would engage this matter, engage the substance of this matter, would be on Thursday, September 20th. And it will be a joint meeting, which this committee will host and will be joined by the planning board at. I would propose that at that meeting, for the benefit of all participants in this process, that would be the evening when we would expect a full and comprehensive initial presentation on all elements of this proposal, how they measure up to against the standards of the various zoning provisions pursuant to which these applications have been filed, and other matters which I'm going to ask the committee to think about sharing in a few moments. That's substantive night number one. I think the city clerk is absolutely right, given the scope of the reviews that had to be done and the volume of material to be reviewed in the course of processing this application, that the only thing that will happen, and I believe that date is Tuesday, October 23rd, on the date when the public hearing would have to occur. Is it the first meeting in October? October 9th, is that hearing will open and be continued. I assume that the applicant will be agreeable without pursuing the matter on that basis. After the 20th of September, and that substantive first meeting, I would expect a comprehensive presentation will occur. I would see this committee having numerous public meetings, which would be work sessions for us, staff, and the applicant, not public hearings. I've been through that before. I would expect it would probably be in the interest of all hands if a site visit, and I'm going to speak to that in a moment, was scheduled with plenty of notice. And then one last point. The process on this matter is different than that on the entertainment of the zoning ordinance change, which led to the council's enactment of the hotel overlay district, whereby the planning board, in its initial phase of the process, was legally obligated to hold a public hearing, so that there were numerous evenings where public hearings were in fact held prior to the city council public hearing. And I would like the councilors and the committee to think about, as we get deeper into this, and the scheduling that will occur after September 20th, for the right time, assuming you accept the concept, that one of our subsequent meetings be a functional substitute for public hearing. It would be limited time, specified time frames for folks with concerns to present their concerns, folks in support to present their concerns. I would expect it to be something where we don't need a whole lot of duplication. This is not legally mandated. I would not accept a whole lot of duplication from either side. We had a lot of that on the public hearing previously held, public hearings previously held. Focused commentary, statements of concern, statements of questions, done at the discretion of the committee so that we get good, solid input as we go forward. How does the committee feel about everything I've said so far?
Fine.
You doing good? Okay. Dates to be determined. We'll work that out as we go. I think the first thing that would happen if we tried to nail down something on the calendar tonight is after the 20th it would go to warrants. So let's just work through this as we get into it. I, for one, would like to point out to the applicant a matter where I have very high expectations on the materials that you will be provided to supplement this application. Because you haven't come anywhere close to meeting the concerns that I've got, nowhere near. And that would be on the matter of the water and wastewater infrastructures that now exist on Commercial Street and Ford Square, and what is going to be done there, when, how. And that, for me, would be a critical reason, and I'm sure there are others, for the site visit. One of the reasons I've talked to Mr. Duggan is to ask that the administration, which has already gotten on a few other streets, to get an engineering consultant who can evaluate the state of those infrastructure assets and the need for their upgrading. Is that when we walk Commercial Street, Ford Square, Dig Safe will go down there, it's going to mark everything that's there, and if we walk every linear foot of water and sewer line, we're going to have an expert who's recently evaluated us, telling us the condition. So that then the applicant will not be surprised when I turn to it and say, well, what are you going to do about it? You with me? Okay. Another concern, and this is more of stitching together, where I think there's work to be done, I'm sure it's not with others, is on the matter of the height exception issue and more supplementation on how that might evolve in our application. Councilor Berger, do you want to jump in with any statement of concerns that we begin to address come September 20th?
Well, I think you get the two big ones I had. As we move forward, and more will emerge, but those are the biggies.
Councilor Hardy.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I believe that the linchpin to this project is the infrastructure. And not only, as Councilor Toby says, where, when, and how, I also have the additional question as to who's going to pay for the infrastructure costs. I don't believe at this point in time I've read anything in the proposal that defines exactly who is going to be paying for the infrastructure, how far it will go through the port. To me, it's infrastructure if you improve only to your boundary lines and you increase capacity of sewer and of water, you could possibly blow out the old lines that are in the loop, coming all the way back up to Commercial Street again. So I'll be looking for definitive plans as to where, when, and who's gonna pay, and what's under the ground, and how we're gonna pay for it. How you're gonna pay for it is what I'm thinking right now, to be perfectly truthful with, because I don't wanna see this on the backs of the taxpayers or the ratepayers. I don't think that that's fair. Height exception, I'll be drawing the question of, should there be 2 height exception permits? One for the tower and one for the buildings. Because if we go only with the tower, which is a higher height than what I believe is being requested for the buildings, then it would leave room to expand the buildings to the height that we allow for the tower. How are we gonna get around that, other than to do 2 different permits, one for the tower and one for the buildings? So I'll be addressing that earlier, if you wanna get some background information on that.
We'll address
It will help me tremendously on that. Site visit, I'm looking forward to that, I hope you can all attend that, and I hope that everybody who's interested in this will also be able to attend it. I'm looking forward to the markings in the street, including the fort, the loop. Everything from Commercial Street, the loop, and all the way back to Commercial Street, both sides. My initial review of the traffic that is in the application itself, I didn't see distances between curb to curb or the distance of the improved sidewalks as to how wide they're going to be. Nor did I see at the west end where they are putting in what looks to be a nubbin to curtail traffic to come to flow more quickly, how many parking spaces we might be losing there. And where are we going to be making up those parking spaces? So those are some of my initial concerns, if they could be addressed up front within the next presentation, within the presentation that you'll be making. I'd be grateful for that.
And the submittal of written materials ahead of time would be enormously appreciated to the extent that they can or have already been generated. I gotta believe too that no one should be surprised by our concern on infrastructure. As someone who's been talking for at least 15 years about the future of the fort and been stymied previous efforts to put together some kind of master plan. Nevertheless, the underlying critical component has been the foundation of infrastructure upon which an industrial park wrapped around a residential district, wrapped around a commercial district, can grow and flourish. We get one bite of this apple, and I think you put it forward, so we got to get it right. Councilor Shalin.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I also request to the chair that we have been talking about a turnaround in front of Cape Cod Madison on the property owned, they used to be owned by the Cuckoos, is now owned by the city.
110 commercial.
Whatever, yeah, I don't know the exact number of it. But, you know, that be included as part of the traffic solution, that if cars, if you're exiting towards Roger Street, but the one that go to the right and end up in that dead end, it's a horrible situation for the trucks and for cars. And I would also ask that when we do our site visit, that we visit that particular site also. And just to get an idea of all the councils and to know exactly where the turnaround can be. This is something that we've been talking about for a long time, and I think this would be the proper time, you know, to review it.
Without objection, you got it.
Thank you.
Councilor McGarry.
Just one observation, Mr. Chairman. If the proponents have done this sort of infrastructure survey on their own dime that you requested of the city, could they share it with the city so that the city has something to evaluate? Our own engineers, I expect, will go into it and look at it. It'd be nice to have something. And also, when we get ours, could we share it with them so that they can prepare?
I think, Ms. Cunningham, you're comfortable with that?
Yes, we were discussing with the city, sharing information.
Super. I mean, frankly, I think the engineering study begins and maybe ends with a literature review because we have been studying infrastructure down there in multiple ways a whole long time. But if there's more to be done, I'm sure it will be. Yeah, councilors? Okay. Everybody on board? Rish? All right, we will continue this matter until September 20th, and we'll look forward to seeing folks at that point. Mr. McKay.
Brief question, one concern which has been brought up, and I've written to you, and we've discussed this directly, is the question of the 10 feet of Pavilion Beach. That's
I
not been
can't
brought
hear
up.
you. Please speak up.
My apologies. One matter which I've written back and forth with Councilor Toby and has not been discussed tonight, and it's a matter of concern for the community, is the 10 feet of Pavilion Beach, which has been included in the hotel overlay district. It's still not clear how it was determined that 10 feet could be included in the hotel overlay, and it has still not been clear for the community if this public asset will be built on.
Have you reviewed the plans before we do the site visit? I think they are rather illuminating on that, but I look forward to your expansion on it on the 20th. Duly noted. I think that does need to be a matter of significant exposition on your parts.
Mr. Chairman, I believe at one of the joint meetings between the planning board and the planning and development, that Attorney Fayette was asked by myself whether or not the 10 feet would be for use of construction only and not for ownership, and the answer was yes, it would be only for construction. Is that right, Mr. Fayette?
You and I have not had any discussion about it.
At the public hearing of planning and development, I asked that question.
I was not allowed to speak at your planning and development meeting on the 4th.
Then I asked, John Cunningham, I'm getting the two, HOD and the E.
I don't know how you.
So the overlay, so little time.
I apologize. Attorney Fayette.
I get blamed for it now.
Damn you, Michael. George.
We'll certainly discuss the beach and as Councilor Toby has said, I think the plans are going to make it clear that the construction is all behind the existing line of the existing building.
Referred to as a lot line on the plans that you
Yes.
submitted.
So the
I want
10
folks to
feet,
take a quick look at that, actually a close look at that. This is all online on the city website from the council packet of our August 14th meeting. Folks ought to look at that closely.
the 10 feet was for use of construction, not possession. I believe that's what we said.
So,
We could,
But
I'd like to
we'll
revisit it
expand
again.
on that going forward.
just very simply then, will they be building on the 10 feet?
And we'll discuss that on the 20th, and folks should review the plans in the meantime, so that they can have a foundation in fact for the discussion of the It's a substantial record, I want folks to be looking at.
A yes or no answer, Ken? It's not
No,
possible.
it's been the subject to review. The folks should be doing their own individual reviews of informed questions. No. Anything further? Mr. Cunningham, councils?
On the 20th, I'd like to make sure that we enter into the record the date the application was filed, fees that were paid, the date that's scheduled for public hearing, everything that was received, all the supporting documentation, so everything will be in the initial record. And I'd also like permission to begin working on the motions, as all motions must be placed in a positive voice. I'd like permission, I would accept the responsibility of making the motions for this
The
committee.
chair would be grateful. I think the exercise needs to be done well with someone
With the continuity of the conditions that may be coming forward from the community, et cetera, I'd like to, that way I can keep track of the
It
conditions
indicates
that
no
might be
conclusion,
done.
it indicates how the process needs to operate, so that we frame this properly as required. Okay, that's it. Why don't we take a 2-minute recess in place? I suspect a few folks are going to be hanging out at this point, and I can call my son-in-law to stay at the final count.
Staying, right? Staying for the next. I might. If you do, I might.
Invoke that, obtain that protection, and as well get some feedback from the community and other interested parties on this incessant demand for a roadway that would cross already substantially environmentally protected watershed land. So if the chair would entertain a motion to refer this matter to public hearing.
Second,
Discussion on the motion?
are you looking for a date? Specific
I would ask
or-
that the date be coordinated with the availability of general counsel and her being thoroughly versed in this matter to make that presentation.
Current agenda, we already have.
Yep.
Thank you.
Anything further, all in favor?
Aye.
Opposed, the ayes have it. Thank you, councilors. Item 3 is the matter of the proposal to amend the status of 107 Atlantic Road and 125 Atlantic Road to create an existing hotel overlay district, initial caps. Who will be present to speak on that matter for us? Councilor Fady, you have the floor.
And I promise I won't confuse it with the other one.
We will not include your brand back on the
We have a few diagrams and things on. Be easier to see it.
Yeah, okay. So just put it right in front of the file and see if that helps.
Okay, Mr. Chairman, could I ask you how you would wish that I proceed? I was prepared to make a presentation. I'm assuming you'll have questions. And following the format you held with the other overlay district, there would be very limited comments. I would be making my presentation. Probably not a meeting.
Wouldn't surprise me, particularly the point you got made. And I know there are folks from the neighborhood concerned. Are those folks represented by council?
Yes.
Okay, good. As I did with the other overlay district, I would look to council for participation as well. But you've got it, so the floor is yours.
Okay. For the record, my name is Michael Fahey. I'm an attorney in Gloucester, and I'm here this evening representing two organizations, which I'm going to refer to simply as the Atlantis and the Bass Rocks. The reason being is that they have corporate names, which home title, but I think it's easier for me, rather than get confusing with the corporate names, to just tell you who are the applicants. The properties are at 107 and 125 Atlantic Road on the back shore. The owners of Bass Rocks Ocean Inn, Tracy Muller, and Tracy is here, she's the manager and the owner, part of the ownership team. And then Jan Boydnaro is the part of the ownership team that owns the Atlantis. Jan is here, right close to the safe. Cool. In any event, I have.
Mike, can you speak up, please? It's kind of hot here.
I'll do my best.
I know, you always do.
I'm going to show you this photograph. These are 3 photographs which show the locus. They're all aerials. This is the more distant view. You can see that we have the 2 hotels on the waterfront. There is no construction or any structures on the street, across the street from the hotels. There is bounded on the, what would be the southerly side of the Atlantis, there's a cluster of several homes, one immediately adjacent to the Atlantis that was constructed some years ago, but certainly well after the Atlantis was there. It's a relatively new home. All of these homes are actually relatively new, except the one that's set back further, the older home back here, further away from the site. On the northerly side of the site is the Elks Lodge, formerly the Easterly Hotel, and the abutter to the entire rear of the property is the Bass Rocks Golf Course. The significance of this photo is it just shows you with the fact that there is no abutters of any consequence to the east except the Atlantic Ocean, and to the other side is the golf course, and this is all open space and no structures or anything of the kind. This is a view from the street focusing in on the issue. As I mentioned, this is the closest residential abutter of Lonsdale's, and this is the hotel, the Atlantis, and this is the Bass Rocks facility. By way of history, this also is the unique building that's at the corner of the Bass Rock, which was first operated in 1946 as a hotel unit before this structure and this structure by two separate owners were constructed approximately 1963. So these people have been there continuously, in generally the same form that they are now since 1963. I think it's very important for this board to understand that there are certain things that these hotels do not do. They are not a function facility. This is not cruise port on backshore. This is not the Ocean View Inn, which is down the street further on Atlantic Road, that has functions, conferences, weddings, and the like. These are hotels, heads in the beds. They're seasonal. The seasonal aspect of their hotel runs basically from May to October. They're also significant contributors to the economic vitality of the city. By way of example, both of these facilities pay approximately $30,000 in real estate taxes.
Cumulatively or individually?
Together, no, each.
Each.
In addition to that, Bass Rock, which is a larger facility, pays $160,000 in room tax, of which the city's share is over $80,000, especially with the increase that was posted by the city, or voted by the city a couple of years ago. The Atlantis pays over $100,000 in room tax, and more than $50,000 of that goes right to the city through the set-off through the room tax. The Atlantis does have a small restaurant in which they serve breakfast, and the cumulative tax from that is another approximately $10,000 in meal tax.
And serve to the public?
Yes, that's the public facility. The Bass Rocks has a restaurant facility, but it's used mainly by their own guests. It's a coffee muffin. Okay? Now, this is the looking at the property from the rear. You can again see that the parking for both of these facilities is predominantly in the rear of the building. There is adequate parking for all the traffic off the street. These are the current layouts of the building. The buildings themselves are shown on this other plan. We'll start with the Atlantis. This is Atlantic Road, okay? And this is the shape of the building. It was constructed in two parts over a several-year process under one permit from the city. I should note also that the Zoning Board of Appeals back in the early 1960s was the group that authorized these hotels. And at the time, the rules were quite simple because there was an encouragement of these facilities on the back shore. And there were more than just these created. Some have been lost over time, but there were other facilities. The Moreland is one that comes to mind. The Moreland, not the old Moreland Hotel, but the Moreland building. Now, this structure is...
And that was, excuse me, and those approvals, as I recall, was the one instance were litigated extensively.
No, the one that was litigated, and Tracy can help me on that, was the attempt to make what is now the Ocean View, which was owned by the Muller family, to make that a larger facility. And that was litigated, not these. Okay? The Atlantis was actually initially constructed by Francis Backros, okay, and started off. And then this is a three-story structure on this side, but it's sunk into the ground. And this is a two-story structure, and the restaurant is in the front part of this. Interesting to note, you can see all the open space that's on the lot. The rear is dedicated almost exclusively to parking. The front of the building, as you can see from the plans also, is dedicated to open space, grass, decorative features, porches for the rooms, and a swimming pool. The Bass Rocks facility is only slightly larger, but it has a total of 3 buildings on it. One, the original manse, which is here, which is a three-story building, approximately 34, 35 feet high, and this building here. And then you have the main 2-story block hotel, and then there's a 10-unit two-story addition over here, which was approved in 1965, I believe, again by the ZBA. So you have, these are not connected, but these are the structure, and the parking is in the rear of the building. Again, similarly, almost the entire front yard is dedicated to either the pool or open space. And the reason I'm emphasizing that is when you see what we're proposing, there is an incentive to keep as much of the front yard as open as is possible. Okay? Now, characteristically from setbacks,
Before
this,
we move on, Mike, you mentioned the structure closest to you has 10 units. What is the allocation of units between the other two structures?
this unit, this building has 7.
38.
Well, no,
Which building?
38 in this,
Yep.
plus the 10 is 48. Pardon?
Building you're referring to, could you remember which one it is?
The one that says two-story block hotel is a 10-unit structure.
On the southerly side.
The two-story block hotel is long rectangular in shape along the westerly side of the property, has 38 units. And then there are 6 units, excuse me, in the main building, plus the office facility. The Atlantis has 40 units total. Okay, so we have 54 in this structure, existing units, and we have 40 in the Atlantis. Now, in terms of setbacks, on the Atlantis, this structure, the front of the hotel, is 28.8 feet from the dedicated layout of the property. I do have some pictures that I can show you later, but I'm going to suggest that we do a site visit on this also. I know everyone is familiar with the site, but I dare say not many people have actually been on the site. I could be wrong, but I do request a site visit. So we have this dimension here is 28.8, and then off to the side of the Atlantis, there's a dimension of 22.4 and 23.6. Those are existing dimensions. There's more than 50 feet in the rear of the structure, and over here we're at 24.2, again, on the property. So this section here, when we get to the discussion, I'll point out to you the areas in which it does not meet and would not meet even our proposed setbacks. On this building, the large building, no issues in terms of setback. There's more than 40 feet back in the rear. The closest spot here is 27 feet, and over here it's more than 40 feet in the abutter. On the northerly side is the Gloucester Elks Lodge. Okay?
On the northerly side?
Yes. That's the heading in that direction. East is the ocean.
Before you delineated, in a previous statement, you delineated the 10 units being on the northerly side. That's the southerly side?
No, I said the two-story block building that's rectangular in shape and on the northerly side, on the westerly side of the facility is what I thought I said.
Building closest to Michael south, building running parallel to Atlantic Road,
West.
and the far old building to
Now, the issue if you look at the current dimensional requirements for hotels, motels, and motorhomes, which is section 3.26 of the zoning ordinance, in the R2 district, or now it's called the R20. It's on page 55 of the zoning ordinance.
the big line.
Yeah. If you look at what the dimensional requirements are in the R20 district, there's a minimum lot area of 40,000 square feet. Both of these facilities have lot area in excess of 65,000 square feet. So they're they're in excess of the minimum lot area. The minimum lot area for 2 guest units is very much of a misnomer, because I think it's intended to read guest unit, but it doesn't really matter for the sake of this argument. It's 10,000 square feet per unit. Now, if you take a facility that has 65,000 square feet of land under the zoning ordinance, this would allow 6.5 bedrooms or 6.5 guest rooms. That's how burdensome this current ordinance is. And if in fact you said, well, it says 2 guest units, then we're talking at 13 units on 65,000 square feet. In addition to that, minimum open space, the same thing, 2 guest units or 1, it doesn't matter, is 7,500 square feet of open space for your units. So if you take that and you assume that, say, 40% or 50% of your facility is open space, that would give you about 32,000 square feet. Divide 7,500 into that, you get 5 units. So you could have 5 units to meet the open space thing, and alternatively 10 if you did by 2, and 13 maximum units to do the other. I've already told you.
So simply put, you're just looking to make this conform with reality.
Reality and why we need to do this. The lot width and lot frontage are not issues. We comply with both of those. And the setback issues, which when this was put in a separate schedule by the city councils after the review, what they did was they pulled out the multifamily requirements and stuck them in here. So that the dimensions for setbacks expand the higher you get. And the base elevation is only 15 feet. So even if you assume the building of the height that's allowed in the district is 30 feet, you'd be essentially adding 15 feet to each of the required setbacks, which means that your rear yard becomes 55 feet, your front yard becomes at least 45 feet, which means you're dealing 100 feet of depth, front and rear. It doesn't leave any room for construction of an existing or renovation of an existing hotel. Now, the issue is that these facilities were both built in the early 1960s. For those of us who can remember back that far, it was an altogether different
Got some
time.
Sometimes I can.
Okay, well, I'm just saying, if you had occasion, especially at that age, at that time, if you thought about going to a hotel or a motor inn or a motel, there were certain expectations. One, we didn't even have, just to tell you this, they weren't even queen beds. There was a full and there was a cot. Bathrooms consisted of a toilet, usually a small sink, and that was it. These are the kind of amenities that were built into this structure, okay? And space. If you go into a hotel now, as opposed to something that was constructed in the 60s, you were expecting a greater degree of amenities. First of all, in the 60s, not all places even had TVs. They certainly didn't have desks for setting up electronic equipment or charging things. Bathrooms didn't include electric hair dryers. They didn't have vanities. They were just sinks. So there's a whole host of things that are expected by the tourist public in today's market that weren't required or expected in 1960. And those things require upgrades. And these two businesses that have been successful, competitive business in Gloucester and paying their proportionate share of their load need to make upgrades to their facilities to remain competitive, be viable, and to also sustain their own economic well-being. And that's what's motivating this idea that we need to expand these facilities. It's not anything else. People can make up things that can get prone to hyperbole, but that's what we're talking about. We need bigger bathrooms, we need bigger sleeping quarters, and amenities that people expect in a quality facility. You heard many of these same arguments when people were talking about another hotel, actually two other hotels, three other hotels in Gloucester. We heard about the one up in, up in Stan Park's facility, the business public requires this, requires that. You heard the same thing over at Essex Avenue, what is expected, room sizes and things like that. And you heard the same thing down before. You need a first-class hotel, it has to have amenities. Distinction, we are still not looking or intending to be a function hall, full-scale restaurants, and things of that nature. It's simply a place for people to come, stay, enjoy what the city has to offer, enjoy the magnificent views and the ambiance of the backshore. Now, what we propose is,
What was the I-20 adopted?
well, it became R20 about 5 years ago. It used to be R2, and then they changed everything from R3 to R10, R2 to R20. It was based on the minimum lot size, because 20,000 square feet is the minimum lot size.
These front yard, side yard issues.
These go back to the early 80s.
Okay, so are we reviewing these two facilities essentially as grandfather
Oh,
pre-existing
yes,
as well?
oh, yes, they're clearly non-conforming structures. The issue, though, is that when you have a non-conforming structure and you have an outstanding permit from the Board of Appeals, they would initially be going to the Board of Appeals. And in the absence of any changes to the zoning ordinance, it would require different relief from two different boards or more in terms of what would be required.
Absent this amendment.
Yes.
Who would they be?
What?
Who would they be? Be at least two.
ZBA and City Council.
Just for the record.
Right.
Which one's going to be there?
Which one? Dimensional requirements.
Fitting height?
Depends. It would depend on whether the height was between
That's
30
one
and...
conversation we did have.
No, I understand that. But when this was recommended, it's recommended with the exclusive. You asked me, I thought you were asking me under the existing rules.
And I was.
Yeah, okay. I'm talking about the existing rules. The proposed is different. Okay? We did have that conversation. So, in any event, what we did was we submitted an application for an existing hotel overlay. It's limited to two structures. And I believe we justified sufficiently to the planning board that these structures deserve to be treated differently. They are really the only two hotels other than the Ocean View, which is an altogether different setup in the actual R2 district. They're contiguous. They're no other hotel in the city is bounded so much by open space or the golf course and nothing across the street in the ocean.
Just for clarity, Attorney Fahey, two properties rather than two structures. I see two structures on one property. So we're looking for two properties?
Yes, it's two.
Not individually two structures, but two
No,
properties.
it's two properties. There's three structures on one and one on the other.
So it's two properties, Dana, not two structures.
There's two properties, one with three structures on one, two on
And the other has one principal building. Now, I'd like to go over what was recommended from the planning board, because that represents the iterations of what was proposed and the discussions that took place, and my client's response to some of that discussion and the planning board's recommendations. On page 1, you've got Greg Cadamatore's letter from the planning board with a recommendation by a 6-0 vote. And that is self-explanatory. I won't have to reread it. On 5.26, it says existing hotel overlay district. The planning board recommends a location entitled. Greg and the board thought it would be more appropriate rather than calling it existing hotel overlay, that would give it a street address. So it could be called the 107, 125 Atlantic Road overlay. It's just a change in name. And rather than try and figure that out, we have absolutely no objection to what it's called. Substance we're concerned with. The other thing is there was a grammatical error in subsection A of 5.261, and that was that it needed to say alteration, expansion, And since the planning board actually took the time to come up with a recommendation regarding the setbacks, it would also apply to the replacement or a new hotel. It would comply with the same overlay. So that reads, to facilitate the alteration, expansion, replacement of or new hotels in the district. So these two lots would have these dimensional requirements for expansion, alteration, and if it was constructed new. The concern there was that if one section required to be replaced because of either structural issues, code issues, we didn't want to be hamstrung if it was more efficient to actually replace what is there. But we are not talking about a wholesale new hotel.
That doesn't say that here. It says no.
This is the planning board's recommendation.
Okay, so I'll be offering an amendment, thank you.
Okay. The rest on that page, there was no other changes. The map, the establishment, the applicability. On the next page,
If we could just go back, you went through 5.2621 yet, for the map?
no, yes, I have intended to, yes.
Okay, have you seen the map yet?
No, what happens is the map, we submitted a plan,
Mhm.
and what it would be is a consolidated map that would become part of the record, so it would be a date, a plan, a survey, and then it would become part of the ordinance.
Okay, so the plan is a compilation of the
Compilation
two
of the
pieces
two
of
surveys.
properties?
Yes.
And when can we see a draft of that? Combined.
My intention would be to see it after the vote, and so before it became signed by the city.
After the vote?
It's just two lots.
I'd like to see it before the vote, I'd like to know what we're voting.
You see it before, that,
Okay.
it's just,
Thank you.
it's intended that it be in the plan, if you have a chance to verify. I would note that I don't think we have a plan on the other one before the vote. It was shown as a sketch, not a survey.
Well, if you can get something in draft form, Michael, so we can see the
Okay.
totality of it all, okay?
Yes.
Because I believe the ordinance does call for submission of a map.
Yes.
Although it doesn't say when, it would be nice to have it beforehand.
I will
Thank you.
have
Could
it.
have been.
Special permits, okay, making it clear in section 5.2624 that any special permits required under this ordinance would be granted under the standards, and these are your standard rules that you have for all special permits and major projects in the city. So those are referencing the sections that apply. And those are existing sections, they're not proposed new sections. Okay? Now, let me come back to the matter of uses as allowed of right, because that is still a hot button issue, and I'd rather deal with that at the end if I could, and then go through the other things first, and you can then perhaps get a better context. General requirements are contained in 5.264. And if you compare those to the ordinance, so you can get an existing ordinance, you can get a sense of the change. Well, the minimum lot size has not changed, so that is still 40,000 square feet. The minimum lot area per guest unit in square feet, we made a determination that approximately, since we weren't looking really for any more than 60 to 65 maximum units in the gas rocks, and in the low 50s in the other facility, that's 750 square feet per lot area for every bedroom or every hotel room that's in the facility made sense. Certainly 7,500, which was what in the previous ordinance, does not make sense. The same thing with open space. And the reason that we reached these numbers and proposed them.
And I understand that there's no application for a specific, looking to change the number of units. But tell me your concept again. The Atlantis has 40 units, and the concept would be, I'm going to 50, which about another 10. And ditto for Bass Rocks.
10 more than 50.
54, up to 64. Thank you.
Now, on the open space per guest unit, 200, we assumed that an average hotel room in this facility and others is going to be somewhere around 250 to 275 to 300 square feet. The facility that you're going to be looking at soon down at Ford, I think, will move to 375 square feet. But we made an assumption that if you were providing almost an equal amount of open space on your facility as you are for using a bedroom, that certainly made common sense and worked. We also looked at some other ordinances in some other cities which are different than Gloucester, but nonetheless, people were always looking at some sort of amount of open space. But in trying to keep the character of the back shore and trying to make it fit these existing uses, you see we have a footnote here, okay? And rather than have, and you people who have been on the council for a while have wrestled with this over time, someone says, where's your open space calculation? I got 8 square feet here, I got 10 square feet over there, I got this row of bushes here, I get credit for the land under the dumpster because I didn't pave it, the driveway aprons, the flagpole, and you add all that up and I meet the requirements.
You get credit for the pool?
The pool is considered open space under the ordinance.
It is.
Yes, it is. So what we did was, I said, why not try and put an incentive in the ordinance that said, at the option of the applicant, if you provide a 10,000 square foot contiguous open space in the front yard, that's an alternative satisfaction of the open space. Thinking that that would encourage the continued openness of the front yard of the building, and would keep the demeanor when people drive down the street, don't see things built up to the property line, or see a series of pockets. They see an opening space.
So the 10,000 is contiguous, if that is over 2 properties?
No, it's
On
10,000
each property?
each, yes. Yeah, each property is treated separately.
And by the way, the planning board didn't object to that footnote, right?
No, in fact, I think they understood it, and they understood that it made it a much more attractive notion than having these pockets that you're adding up, and as you probably know, they tend to get abused over time. The contiguous area was out there. Now, lot width and lot frontage are not issues. The front yard, and here what we've done is we've adopted the R2 standards. And the rationale for that is this. These structures and these facilities have been here for more than 50 years. And no one can raise any issue about problems with their operation, with that they're overcrowding the site, that there's not sufficient space on the site to handle the people who visit them, and all of those things. And our thought was that that's a testament to the fact that those dimensions would work. And if you look at the existing requirements, and we're doing a 30 on the front, 30 side to be 20, 30 on the front, and 30 in the rear. If you see here, this is on Bass Rocks, we have one spot here where we'd be 26 feet from the street on an existing building. And the way we've worded the footnote is it would be 30 feet or whatever exists currently on the site. So the setback for that building, not for this, because this is a separate building, mind you, on this would be no closer than the 26 feet shown here. On the sideline here, the 20 feet setback meets all of the requirements. The rear yard meets the requirements. And in this older building here, the Nance, we're at 19 feet 2 from the layout of Atlantic Road, but further off the traveled way. There's actually a horseshoe-shaped driveway that comes in here and goes by there.
So should this be enacted, I take it would be your intention that the map calls for about 526.2.1 would include the existing structures and show all these
Yes,
things?
yes, absolutely.
Which again speaks to why I think you want to have it before we go.
Yeah, you need to determine
I think
also
that's right.
what those measurements are at the time of the application.
Correct.
Well, that's why we've had it all surveyed. have those certifications. And this is Atlantic Road. Again, these meet the requirements. This is 1 foot, 0.2 off, and that it meets all the requirements. So the Atlantis meets all the requirements except this one section here with the proposed ordinance. And this is minuscule, 1 foot less than we're proposing. And so those would become the requirements in this overlay district. The building height, conclusions were reached about the fact that any expansion of these facilities would be upward, and the existing heights of these buildings are around 20 feet.
Conclusion was reached by whom?
The owners. Okay, and for structural reasons too, that you want to build up. Now, the issue there is that we believe that we possibly can get them at or under 30 feet, especially if the overlay is handled the same way as handled elsewhere in the ordinance. The mechanicals on the roof for commercial buildings do not apply. So air conditioning, things of that nature that are on the roof would not be subject to that same restriction.
Which is the case, I'm sorry,
As long as it's not habitable.
That's right. Yes.
which is the case for the other hotel overlay, which was an
Yes, absolutely. Yeah, no change from the existing ordinance. And to the extent that we couldn't meet that requirement, then Mrs. Hardy was correct. We said that we would agree that would be subject to the city council's special permit in accordance with the same section you have now, 3.16. But you have it split now between the Board of Appeals and the city council. And we're looking to go one-stop shop. And as she correctly pointed out at the meeting, why wouldn't this be handled the same way?
3.26?
116 is the height exception of the section. Okay, the principal buildings, Greg was adamant about having this in there. I don't think it has any effect on us whatsoever because we're not adding principal buildings to any of these structures. So it's not as if it's going to come into play, but he wanted to have it in there for any future use.
Only one principal building on each lot, right?
Well, it depends what you call it. These are really, there's no restriction of only one principal building on a lot in anything other than a single-family residence district. So it's not the same rule. We have 3 principal buildings because principal is defined as anything that's not accessory.
Is it defined?
Well, no, it defines accessory, anything that's not principal. Corollary of that would be anything that's not principal, that's accessory. It's not well defined.
No, it's not.
Maybe he was looking at new buildings, if he were building new,
Yes.
because he wanted something in there.
He wanted the 10-foot separation
Exactly.
or the height. And that's what.
Mhm.
We intend to meet all of the current off-street parking requirements, but we've even had a bonus in here. We said to the extent that there's more parking, as verified, to be verified by the building inspector. If there's more parking than is currently required, and even under an expansion, we would go with a larger number rather than the bare minimum. The contents of the application would be through the special permit process, the city council's regular special permit process. And paragraph 5268 mirrors the overlay, other local overlay districts, that any relief is by special permit, not variance by the city council. Now going back to the hot button item. And I have
Okay, I want to interrupt you before, if I could, before we get to that, and ask counsel for folks with concerns, Mr. Pino. Just give me a yes or no, and if there's more to it than that, you'll get your time. Everything we've covered so far, you all, can you live with it? No. Then we'll come back to that, okay.
Now, had I understood
how much people would be offended by the word "as of right." I would have chosen another word that maybe said "allow" or "permit." But in any event, it struck me when we were writing this that there has to be some threshold under which any legislative body, such as the city council, would say, that's really not significant enough expansion or a change that we need to get involved in the whole city review and permitting process. And so I thought that if we made this certain changes would be allowed as of right, or permitted or allowed, then they complied with the dimensional requirements. In other words, anything that required an exception would pull you out of this as of right category, that there would be some threshold. And initially, we said a 30% increase in the number of rooms was the original submission. We then changed to some bulk dimension, trying to see if that was something that appealed to people. And we came back finally with a suggestion of no more than 10 units total for each of the properties. The planning board's position was that they were not in a position to determine whether something should be as of right, because it effectively curtails your jurisdiction over the issue, and that issue should be left to you. So they did not make a recommendation on that at all. I still believe that there should be some threshold, and it may be less than 10, but it still should be something that people would know in their planning process that they would be allowed to do. It's in every other aspect of the building code. It's in every other aspect of the zoning code. There are certain changes that they comply with the dimensional requirements. They're in. They are thresholds. I understand that. But we are still asking for you to consider that. Now, someone asked me, I don't think it was you, Mrs. Hardy, but someone else asked me, you know, is this a deal breaker? At this point, nothing is a deal breaker, but we are really still pushing this because we think it's important. And I think that these businesses, having been here for 50 years, are entitled to some consideration on this issue. I can't put it any more clearly than that.
Tell me how you see at each site, threshold 10 additional units impacting the intensity of the activity.
The intensity of the activity?
Yeah, I mean,
Would be
so what's going to be different? I mean,
There'll be a third floor. Each building would be 1 story high. That's it.
that's it. I mean, you'll have a few more people, you'll have a few more cars.
Yes.
But you'd have to meet all the requirements of the parking and the setback. That would be the issue.
But I take it that the sense of your clients is that those are minimal intensifications of activity in the site.
Yes. 10 rows.
Just to give me a picture of this, again, conceptually, have you all done any conceptual plans so that folks would see what this third floor would look like?
Not yet.
When you think about it.
But if you look at the two structures, and that's why I think that it's extremely important to do a site visit.
Yeah.
There are limitations placed on what you can do on the third floor, unless you were just plainly trying to be grotesque. It's going to be pretty much the same model because of the way they're built. You're not going to create whole new facades on 2 stories below the 3rd story. So that's why I think the site visit is important. It would be probably very much similar to what's there.
So it's an increment of difference you think we'll see that's, again,
Well, I think you'll
hugely
see-
intensifying what's going on.
I don't think you'll see this as usually intensification of the properties.
Might there be some kind of demarcation on each building just to give us a sense of, how high this thing would be, where it might be? Obviously, we can't hold you all to it,
We can do that.
but the image might be helpful to us.
These are remarkably low structures right now. And one of the reasons that they are so low, and I have a picture that I can show you, I have it with me right here, but yeah. is that look at this. This is the roof of the Atlantis. And what's conspicuously missing from the roof that you see in all of the commercial buildings? Mechanicals. So that's why the buildings are only 19 and 20 feet high. There's no parapet around them or anything. So this could all be, in other words, when you get there and you see it, I think you see what the image would be.
So at the peak, it's 20.
Pardon?
The current height is to the.
Yeah, you can see the neighbor's property, actually much higher than this.
No, frankly, maybe an important part of framing concerns. I mean, I'd be
Can I
curious
see that
if
picture
you,
again, please, Ken?
if y'all could do some sort of demarcation of how high and where conceptually, and perhaps the abutters would be good enough to let us come in and look out the windows, which we have done in other places. I think that might give further context to what's going on. If everybody's there.
I think this is the other picture I referred to, the front of the Atlantis
I know,
building
just-
where the restaurant is. Here, the neighbor's property. So what I had devised here in this language was that there would be a certain uses that would be allowed, and those would include less than the 10 units or less of an increase, would have to comply with the ordinance dimensional requirements. And just as importantly, if you look at paragraph C, 52631, we talked about existing uses. So there was issues raised by one of the neighbors saying, well, we don't know what else they're going to put in there. And we said, we're willing to be wedded to the existing uses. So those are the existing accessory uses, not new uses. So for instance, adding conference facilities, adding meeting rooms, all of those things would not be existing uses. So those would not be included in the expansion or alteration of the facility.
Can you give us a list of what the existing uses are?
Yes, I
So that we can-
Thank you, you read my mind, because I was going to suggest, I mean, we went through a drill, which probably we didn't need to do, it was belts and suspenders. When we did the hotel overlay district down in Fort, which said anything not authorized isn't allowed. That's pretty good. And then we said, oh, by the way, that means no casino. Just to make it crystal clear for folks who needed, we'll simply say that degree of clarity. It might be useful to slam a listing of the existing uses and things that aren't among those existing uses on the plan that would be submitted, that would be part of the enactment of the 52621.
We can
Sure.
annotate the
Sure.
plan so we can see the uses and the location of the uses. And I think that's frankly what I have to say. And obviously, if there's
We've been
questions.
peppering you with questions, and thank you for accepting our pepper. Are there other questions from the committee, Mr. Fahey, at this point?
Yes.
Ms. Lahari?
If we would allow the by right provisions that's stated in 526, at what point would future development or redevelopment of the property have to come before the city council for special permit?
Anything other than that initial expansion.
So they can have the 10 units without coming before the council again? Okay,
And nothing else.
all right, so,
In other words,
This
this wouldn't be, I get 10 units now, 10 units 6 months
it's
from
as
now.
of the date of,
Yes, it's 10 units and it's a one-time deal. And I think that's fair to also let everybody, so that people don't get incremental.
so the only thing before us is zoning, and there's nothing here that would necessitate coming forward to the city council if it would stay under those 30 feet.
Stay
And it's
under the 30
under the 10
feet,
units,
and-
10 units or less,
Yes.
so you wouldn't have to come in, okay. Therefore,
we
I
did-
believe now's the time for me to raise the question that it's not going to be called before the city council as a major permit or anything else in the future. I have concerns for the residential property side of the Atlantis. And my concern would be that the people who built the home immediately adjacent, the residential home immediately adjacent to the property, built there knowing where the windows of the hotel were, exactly what would be the view space from the hotel, and to put another floor on, and to peer into their property. I mean, even as evidenced by your photo here.
Sure, floor is yours.
Thank you. Ralph Pino, I'm an attorney with Automobile there.
Yeah, I do, just so everyone can see it. Everybody else is like, I need to see the mouth to hear.
Ralph Pino, I'm an attorney with offices at 46 Middle Street in Gloucester, and I represent Mr. and Mrs. Fonzo who are about the property. Let me start out before I sort of get into the meat of this.
Just for the record, has there been any representation from one of the house for the golf club on this matter?
Yes.
No.
Somebody else represented it.
One person with one of the committees of the Elks came and said that the trustees supported it, and no one has been involved.
And if we can get an extract of that from the record of the planning board, I think that'd be fantastic.
Mr. Toby, the golf course is not opposed to this.
I take the silence to be,
Okay.
I didn't say they were.
I got it.
Well, in our first conversation, Ralph, you intimated that you were representing three groups.
Well, that's because they called me and changed their mind, Michael. I was not misrepresenting to you.
Do me a favor, guys, no more of that.
And let me say that while Michael's an honorable person, what he's talking about here just really isn't the subject matter. His clients are very nice people. They have run very nice establishments. We're sympathetic of them wanting to upgrade, but every representation made about what they might do, going up line, leaving it, really has nothing to do with what we're doing here, because none of those things are binding. You can't limit it to these people. And so when we analyze the zoning, what we're looking, whoever buys it. You could sell these two lots the day after this goes into effect. Nothing changes there, and they can do whatever is allowable under what is proposed. So let's keep that in mind, that we're not doing it for some people who've been there for 50 years. We're doing this for two parcels of land, which could just as easily become one parcel. So let's keep that in mind. Now, when we talk about the overlay, which hasn't been discussed much, there really should have been some public purpose rather than just spot zoning these two parcels. Now, if you look at the fourth parcel, we had a vacant parcel, endless discussion about public benefit, whether you agree with it or not, to pass an overlay. What we have here are two successful, extensively built pieces of property, successful pieces of property that make money, that are full virtually every single day of the summer. And so we decided that because these two parcels, I guess, should be treated differently than everybody else and make more money in the district, we're going to do an overlay. I think it's a bad concept to do an overlay. Now, I have some
Are you
sympathy.
asserting the overlay as a swap?
Yes,
Tell me why.
because you're taking two properties with no discussion of a public benefit or good that aren't in any kind of a distress, and in fact are the opposite of distress, and you're taking them out of the whole zoning district and treating them differently.
Interesting. So the fact that the underlying existing use remains the same is really, to some extent, intensified, doesn't.
It can be extensively intensified under this, and that's what I want to go into.
Why don't you do a placeholder for rebuttal on squat?
But when you get to, you start through this, leave out, I'll just comment on that. And you asked me earlier about a matter of take out the matter of right, and was I happy with the dimension?
Well, could you live with it?
Could we live with it? And I said no. But think about what we could do under this ordinance as you take it down. I buy the two properties, I knock them down, or I replace them. I don't know if it's new or replaced, but you can knock them down. And I now have this gigantic dimensional square or rectangle that I can do it. I have very close sidelines. My only parking requirement is basically to take the existing parking that's there and add on parking for the extra rooms I add. If I don't add any extra rooms, I don't need to add a single parking lot, even though I vastly expand my building. Now I can take my accessory use, my restaurant, and this is just one example. Take one accessory use of a restaurant, and there are two there, I'm told, and I decide what I really want are the same number of rooms in a big building and a 300-person restaurant. bond endorsement. Whatever I can fit in there in 2 floors to 30 feet, you can do it as a matter of right. I say, this argument, there's nothing that stops it. Our big objection is, and my clients are not opposed to upgrading these facilities, to modernizing these facilities. And if you look at the earliest planning board hearing, many, many neighbors came in, and their consistent expression of objection or inquiry was that we have no idea what's really going to be built here, no idea what it's going to look like, no idea what the thing is, and we want to see it. So we are strongly objecting to blanket dimensional requirements that fit these 2 parcels by extensive change, expansion of uses, huge differences in traffics, nothing to keep it from being a year-round massive restaurant with the same number of rooms. And so we think it needs to come back to the council, and we're not opposed to some of the small specifics. I might note that the minimum lot area per guest unit, the open space per guest unit, while they're, I agree, somewhat absurd in the size, on the Essex Avenue Hotel, you can waive those with a special permit, you can diminish those. We asked for both of those and we got those. Under your special permit authority, you can look into the parking, you can look into what is this building going to look like, how is it going to function. And we had endless discussions on the hotel on Essex Avenue about what it was going to look like, redesign. For the neighbors of everyone, we try to get happy. All of this is gone. We're totally circumventing the whole notion of zoning by doing this spot, which has been for years that the council, and maybe it should, I don't have a strong objection that it be the council that could take the whole package of goods, not have to go to the Board of Appeals. But to have some kind of a proposal for 2 lots, which allows, even if you don't call it as a matter of right, endless, gigantic possibilities without ever having a public review, just strikes me as an absurdity. And it's, I'm not sure if they came in to try to modify and expand the use that the neighbors would even care about. We have no idea what it's going to look like.
I need you to build on that for me, though. Endless, gigantic expansions. But I could envision a contrary argument in 546.31 that the only item in play here is no more than 10 additional rooms per site. Tell me why that's wrong.
Because you have the rooms per site, but if you go over to 526.31C, existing uses, accessory or incidental to a hotel will also be allowed by right. So if you allow the existing restaurant use, so if the use is allowed, the only thing we then fall back to are the dimensionals,
So
which
you
are
think
huge,
implicit-
and the parking, which doesn't say you need 1 parking space to expand your restaurant.
So you think implicit in C is expansion of existing uses, accessory?
They're allowed. Existing uses are
You
allowed.
see the words expansion
Right,
as implicit.
sure.
I'm sorry, keep going.
And so, I think the bottom line here really should be the denial of the overlay district. And go back to the zoning, and if you don't like the way the hotel permitting process works, and I'm very sympathetic, I mean, we did the hand-to-hand. We designed that project so that we didn't have to go to the board. Plain and simple. It might have been a little better plan, but we avoided the Board of Appeals.
We built that goddamn hotel in the Blackwood Industrial Park as a hotel that people wanted. I can think of a whole bevy of things that would have been avoided, but we'll save that for later.
Exactly. But hotels do get permitted under the current plan. I mean, they do get permitted under the current plan, and certainly to expand and modify these hotels is a lot easier project than permitting the 2 hotels that are already permitted in Gloucester, although admittedly not built. And so I would think a zoning change which brought the ability for all the permitting under a city council major project special permit, take away from the Board of Appeals would be a reasonable end game for something like this. So you don't have to go to 2 boards. But giving just, you have no idea what's going to be built there under this proposal, and you'll never have a chance to see it or object to it.
rebuttal for this evening?
Yes. Four very quick points. On the public benefit.
Well, do we even need to, tell me that, do we even need to go through the spot zoning analysis?
Well, first of all, Mr. Pino, in a letter written by Mr. Shalino to the planning board, all suggest that there has to be some derelict feature to a property to be included in an overlay district. And that there's nothing in the law that says you can deal with derelict properties only.
That caught my attention. Do you have any say for that?
I say it is one of the things that is considered, but there has to be a public good, is what I'm saying.
So
One of the things, derelict is helpful. But highly successful is the opposite of that.
So you don't say derelict is a necessary condition precedent, but it might be an element that could be looked to. Is that correct?
It's one of the elements to look at the public.
Okay.
Now, the public benefit. If you ask and look around and talk to people in Gloucester, certainly people in the Community Development Department, and in the mayor's own reports, they're talking about a three-legged economy in the city. And one of the ones that they're pushing is tourism. And the only one that has actually experienced growth has been the tourist business. Even in this recession, people are still finding their way here. And again, to Ralph's point, they're full almost every night. Well, what does that tell you? What does a smart business person do? They say one of two things. Either we raise our prices, so we're not full every night, and maximize the profit, or you say, maybe it's time for us to expand. And that is what's driving it here. And when you see this council authorize the construction of a big facility, hotel in Sam Park's facility, one on Essex Avenue, another one coming, and you say, what, are we supposed to sit back here and not do anything to our facility to compete? This is a pure economic argument. They have a right to compete, and they're coming in. Now, he says, he says he and his group designed the hotel on Essex Avenue so it didn't have to go to the Board of Appeals. Guess what? It was in a business zone. This is in a residential district, R20. You couldn't build this. And he could say, well, we designed it so you could. Apply those measurements in 2.36 to this property and see what you've got. You'll have one of those little houses that they call in New Orleans, a shotgun house. That's all that you would fit. It would all you could fit on here, okay? This wouldn't be a hotel complex. This would be an oasis. That's what we're talking about. And the other point is that somehow or other, and Ralph used this argument before the planning board, a huge 200-seat restaurant. Well, guess what? That would be a significant change in the use. You said you've been in the Atlantis restaurant, okay? The little space that they have at the Bass Rocks. It's not a whole lot bigger than this room. Now, the thing is that you would have to expand your parking, just like anyone else does. There's no special exception. When you have a parking requirement, it applies to added uses. And so they would have to do that. They would have to make a decision. But I've already told you, we're protected here on the section that Mr. Toby was focusing on, section 5.26C, 2631C, existing uses. We're not talking about new or expanded use. It was a careful approach not to say alteration, expansion of existing uses.
So that concern could be addressed by a little bit more additional
Yes,
words.
yes, it could. And we went through that at the planning board level and said that whatever language would get that.
26.
And in addition to that, we also said publicly that, this notion that there'd be this megaplex, that the properties would suddenly, they'd run out of here, sell it to one person. We already said publicly that we would accept a condition that would stay in two separate parcels because there's space between the buildings. And again, there's no one pulling any punches in it.
Well, so my takeaway from this is that there need to be two pieces of wordsmithing I would ask you all to do. One would be that belt and suspenders clarification, as I see it, on 526.31C, and the other would be the additional language on two parcels, not one. I want to back you up one more time to that. You talked about why it's not spot. I'm still trying to figure out if this is even amenable for discussion of being spot. You got a pre-existing non-conforming use with a degree of amplification. If this were made subject to being an overlay, would that be something that is reasonably back as a spot? Do we need to go down that road?
Because it's not even just a non-conforming use, it's a specially permitted part of the use. And all we're doing
Yep.
is changing the dimensional requirements for the same use. The use is allowed in the district, this is not.
Because of that zoning board
Yeah.
ruling from the 50 years ago. So what do you think of that? You disagree?
It's actually allowed under the current ordinance,
Yes.
allowable use, independent of any ZBA decision. Currently.
The current use is allowed by special permit.
I mean, I'll tell you, I'm not moved by spots.
And again, it's not like we're changing any use. This is altogether different than if you segregate out a parcel and you say, you can do something that no one else can do. All of the R2 parcels, have the same rights. But in this instance, it's limited to these parcels with regard to these dimensional requirements. So it's a change in dimensional requirements, but there's no change in use. I don't think there's any argument to be made for spot zoning. And if you're looking at a public benefit, I already gave you the tax numbers, which are considerable. And I really, and my clients, really sort of resent being characterized as being too successful. So therefore, they don't qualify for something that we think we're entitled to. Thank you.
Feeling a wrong joke coming on, but I'm resisting it. Councilor Shalino.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I just want to make a correction. What I said in my letter is that overlays are used in blighted areas, not decaying areas. And I think that was the intention of the state legislature when it created overlays, that it be used for create new vitality in blighted areas. And I just want to correct that. And then the last
I
thought.
note that. I'm not sure I accept that as a correction.
Well,
You note it, but I don't think
well, that's what I said, blighted, not decaying. But, and we can also research that with our state representatives, of what was the original intention of overlays, and get a ruling from them. But the bottom line is, and it's what I've been saying all along, is one, of course, is these people are good people, good citizens, good business people. But after this is done, as we all know, that property could be sold to the double. And then all these permits that we're going to be issuing are going to go along with that property. And so that's, that's the big part of the equation. And you can't just say that we need to, just because these people are very upstanding, that they're going to adhere to whatever, is talked about here tonight, whether it be restaurants or whatever. We need to understand that when the property gets sold, the permits go along with it.
Mr. Chairman,
Council.
I'd just like to add that no matter what we permit, there's always the possibility that the property is going to flip to somebody else. This is
Right, I know.
anything new.
So every time we do it, Counselor, we have to keep in mind that the property can flip. But the argument that I've heard here between the planning board and now tonight is that how wonderful these people are, and they are. And what great piece of people they are. But that keeps on going over and over as why we should rezone or do an overlay. And we have to consider that it stays with the property, to consider the property in the possibility of the property being joined.
Always a possibility.
Okay. Next steps, site visit. I'd ask the collective committees to try to schedule that. I would ask that if you have a weekend, not paying the work, work week. You work 7 days a week in your business. Let's try to get that scheduled. I think you captured the kinds of concerns we had on what we'd like to be able to do at the site visit. Mr. Peter.
I have one concern just on the matter of date. I believe, as I was told, that there's a continuation of this or scheduled for the 20th of September. Is that correct, first of all?
We're on for
That's
public
the-
hearing on the 11th. That's being
That's for the
confused.
Oakport Hotel.
Okay, fine. I was told that it was a terrible date for my clients.
Right now, as
Neighbors.
Mr. Beard said, the hearing has been moved out to September 11th to try and keep in compliance with that schedule, but obviously it's going to have to be probably continued past that.
And I think we can agree this evening, with the forbearance of the council president, as well as with the census schedules, that it will be continued from the 9/11 date to a date no earlier than the first meeting in October. Is that what you-
Yes, last date in September is pretty much
He said that's the soonest.
Good.
Is there any possibility to suggest the next council meeting, if that would be a conservation department issue?
Do we what?
The first meeting in October,
Yes.
so you'd rather it be the second. Is that what you said? Any problem with that?
With all due respect, you know, who's driving the ship? We filed this application on March 12th. I mean, why, Mr. Pino was not saying he can't be here. It was pushed over to the first meeting in October. I mean, I don't know, since we make schedules for one person to be here, I don't agree with that. And we waited a long time. And we granted the continuances, and we're prepared to do that, but I don't see this as being a requirement. This isn't the city council asking us to move it.
It gets into our October 9th agenda.
It could.
It
But
could.
you
I
can't.
cannot be there, I will be out of the country.
This is when it's wonderful not to be council president. I would throw that to the council president. Considerations of fair play will
Well,
matter.
if
Just
you'd
how
like
some of
to
us
submit
vote.
your requests or your opposition to a certain date, please submit it in writing. Other than that, we'll continue it to a date certain on the 11th of September.
Thank you.
So I would ask when the committees coordinate that scheduling, that besides the three of us, the two legal counsel, the drivers on this.
That's what he said.
That would be a Saturday, yeah.
They should have stayed.
On your site visit, you, see, my house is directly behind, and I can see part of Bass Rocks is all in there, and it's gonna go up another probably 10 feet. Could you, on the site visit, could you look up the fairway, and you'll be able to see my house, it's a great slate roof, and would that interfere in my view?
Well, we have asked that there be some conceptual depiction, some sort of erection of something or another.
Yeah, so,
That would start giving a sense of what we think you would.
yeah, I like to look at.
It's conceptual, but
Yes.
I think it may provide some
Yeah.
guidance.
Especially since it's not coming back to the city council for special permit. Yeah, absolutely.
And then what we need to do is schedule a follow-up P&D, which I would suggest will be the next regular P&D meeting after the site visit. And we'll keep this thing on a
What day was that meeting?
subject to when we have the site visit. Any further? We'll continue this for site visit and subsequent P&D meeting when we get to that.
Excuse me, Councilor Toby, you gave Attorney Fahey a little bit of a homework assignment to work on a couple of sections. I'd like to include 526.1A for the wording for new hotels. I'll be offering an amendment, but I'd be curious to see what you'd like to.
I picked a date for the site visit, you're gonna let us know.
Yeah, Dana's gonna reach out to you too. Deal with the vagaries of all three schedules. Anything further? All right, thank you, one and all.